Okay, let's dive in. How on earth do you send a warning across, what, 10,000 years?
It's a staggering thought, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, imagine trying to warn people maybe 10 millennia from now about nuclear waste buried deep underground, something they can't see, can't smell.
Languages change, cultures vanish.
Yeah,
How do you even start?
exactly. And this massive problem led to, well, a really fascinating, kind of wild idea, the Ray Cat.
Ah, yes, the RayCat. It pops up in discussions about long-term communication, and it really captures the imagination.
It really does. So this idea came from two philosophers, François Bastide and Paulo Fabri, back in 1984. They were building on work done by something called the Human Interference Task Force.
Right, that task force was grappling directly with this issue.
So today, that's our mission for this deep dive.
Exactly.
Exploring the Raycat. Where did it come from? What was its real purpose? How did it capture attention? And, why did this seemingly strange idea actually spark serious debate?
Because of interesting material to draw on academic papers, news pieces, even, believe it or not, a song inspired by it.
Yeah, the song is something else. But first, let's set the stage. The problem itself, the Human Interference Task Force.
Okay, so early 80s, the U.S. Department of Energy convenes this group, their job. Figure out how to warn the future about radioactive waste repositories, like the one proposed for Yucca Mountain in Nevada.
And we're talking really long-term warnings. 10,000 years is a time frame often cited because that's how long some of this waste remains dangerously radioactive.
Precisely. How do you make sure nobody accidentally digs this stuff up millennia from now? It's a monumental task.
Yeah, and some of the early thoughts from the task force were, well, they were creative. There was talk of oral transmission, basically trying to create myths or legends that would last.
Yeah, and the linguist Thomas Seebuck proposed this concept of an atomic priesthood.
An atomic priesthood.
Yeah,
Wow.
like a dedicated group whose sole purpose across generations would be to preserve the knowledge and maybe perform rituals to warn people away from these dangerous sites, almost like creating a new religion in a way.
It sounds like something out of science fiction, but it highlights the scale of the problem, doesn't it? How fragile our usual ways of passing down information are over such huge timescales.
Absolutely. Languages drift, meanings change, cultures collapse. Relying purely on stories or symbols is incredibly risky over 10,000 years,
So they needed something else, something more fundamental.
perhaps. And this is where Bastide and Fabri's idea comes in. They published it in a German semiotics journal, Zeitschrift für Semiotik.
Semiotics, the study of signs and symbols. Makes sense.
Exactly. They proposed this concept of a living radiation detector.
Enter the Ray Cat.
Well, sort of. Crucially, they didn't actually insist it had to be a cat. They used Raycat radio chat in French, Strahlenkatze in German, more as an illustrative name.
Ah, okay, so it was a placeholder.
A placeholder designed to convey the function of the creature, even if language evolved dramatically. The name itself hints at radiation and, well, a cat. Easy to grasp.
So the core idea was a creature that would physically change in the presence of radiation.
Yes. They were thinking semiotically. The animal itself becomes the warning sign, a biological signal.
Did they say how it would change? Like, would it actually glow? That's the image everyone seems to have.
That's the popular image, yeah. But Bastide and Fabry were actually more nuanced. They didn't dictate the specifics. They pointed to a human genetic condition, xeroderma pigmentosum, where UV radiation causes visible skin changes, as just an example of the kind of radiation-linked visual change they meant.
Okay, so not necessarily glowing green, but some kind of obvious, visible change triggered by radiation.
Exactly. The key was that the change had to be unambiguous and clearly linked to the danger zone. Someone called it a feline Geiger counter.
I like that, a living Geiger counter.
And to make sure the message stuck, they suggested coupling this biological sign with cultural reinforcement.
Like the atomic priesthood idea.
Sort of, but maybe more dispersed. They proposed creating folklore, myths, proverbs, simple rhymes, things that would embed the connection in culture. When the cat changes color, run away.
So a two-pronged approach. The biological signal and the cultural story explaining it.
Precisely. A belt and suspenders approach to long-term communication.
It's such a strange, yet compelling idea. And it really did capture people's attention, didn't it? Especially more recently.
It did. A big moment for its popularization was definitely the podcast 99% Invisible.
Mm-hmm.
They did an episode in 2014 called 10,000 Years.
Ah, I remember that one. It really brought the Ray Cat concept out of academic circles.
Yeah, and one of the producers, Matthew Keelty, made a really insightful point in that episode. He argued that even if the specific myths or songs degrade over time, get garbled,
Hmm.
fundamental message the cat changing means danger, get that core visual association might actually survive even when the original language is long gone.
That makes sense. The image itself carries the warning.
And 99% Invisible went even further. They commissioned a musician, Emperor X, to write a song.
Right. The 10,000-year earworm. What a
Good,
title.
yeah. 10,000-year earworm to discourage settlement near nuclear waste repositories. Don't change color, kitty. You can't forget that.
No, you can't. And the goal was literally to make it an earworm.
That was the brief. Make it super catchy, maybe even a bit annoying, so it burrows into your brain. The idea was this song could become part of that future folklore Bastide and Fabry suggested.
A piece of manufactured mythology. What were the lyrics like?
Oh, incredibly simple. Repetitive. Don't change color, kitty. Keep your color, kitty. Stay that pretty gray. And then don't change color, kitty. Keep your color, kitty. Keep sickness away.
Wow. It's like a nursery rhyme warning about radiation poisoning. Bizarrely catchy, actually.
It is catchy, though ironically, as Emperor X himself noted, it hasn't exactly become a global phenomenon in our time. Spotify listens are relatively low.
So maybe the 10,000-year plan isn't quite on track yet?
Perhaps not. But he saw it more as a thought experiment, something to make people think about how you'd actually try to create such a long-lasting cultural artifact. It's been called a bop, though.
A bop for the deep future. And didn't 99% Invisible also make merchandise?
They did. Being based in Oakland, they created gear for a fictional baseball team, the Oakland Raycats.
No way. That's brilliant.
Yeah, apparently the t-shirts were pretty popular. It just shows how the idea itself resonated, became this symbol.
A symbol for this massive communication challenge.
And there was even a short documentary in 2015, The Raycat Solution, which interviewed Paolo Fabri himself and Matthew Keelty. Fabry seemed quite amused by the song and the t-shirt, seeing his semiotic concept take on this pop culture life.
Okay, so it captured the imagination, but what about actually making Raycats? Back in 1984, that must have seemed impossible.
Oh, absolutely. Genetic engineering was in its infancy, creating a cat that changes color on cue with radiation. Pure science fiction then. The tools just didn't exist.
But things change. Technology advances.
Exactly. And fast forward to 2015, a DIY biology group, kind of a biohacking collective in Montreal called Bracobio, they actually started something called the Raycat Solution Movement.
Seriously, they're trying to build it.
They're seriously investigating the possibility, yes. Their goal is to explore engineering organisms, maybe starting with cats eventually, to change color, not just for radiation, but potentially for other things too.
Like what?
Well, they're thinking about triggers, like specific chemicals or toxins. Imagine a houseplant changing color if there's a gas leak, or a fish changing color in polluted water.
Huh. So taking the core concept beyond just nuclear waste.
Right. They're looking at mechanisms like bioluminescence, making things glow like fireflies, or specific enzyme interactions that can trigger a visible color shift.
Are they starting with cats?
No, they're being very methodical. The plan is to start with much simpler organisms like bacteria or maybe nematodes, little worms, Prove the concept there before even thinking about complex mammals like cats. But they are serious about the long-term goal.
That's fascinating. So the idea, even if not pursued by governments for waste sites, lived on and inspired actual scientific exploration.
It really did. And even though the U.S. government didn't adopt the Raycat plan,
Right.
and the whole Yucca Mountain project got shelved,
Right, that's important context.
the Raycat idea still had this ripple effect, especially in academia. In nuclear semiotics, obviously, but also just semiotics generally.
How so? What did academics make of it?
Well, it became this really interesting case study. You had scholars like Thiebaud and Marino describing the Raycat as a possible soteriologic figure.
Soteriologic, meaning related to salvation.
Yeah, like a symbolic savior figure, protecting future humans from this invisible danger. It speaks to our need for symbols when facing these huge, almost incomprehensible threats.
And wasn't there a point about it being a meme before it was famous?
Right, Mattia Thiebaud pointed that out. He said the Raycat was already kind of a meme, a known concept within the semiotics community, well before the 99% Invisible episode brought it to the public.
So it wasn't just seen as this quirky, oddball idea.
Not just that. Thiebaud argues it's important because it forces us to ask really deep questions about communication across time. How is meaning made? How does it survive? How do we speak to the future, and how will the future understand us?
It really pushes the boundaries of how we think about communication.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And looking back, a report from the Nuclear Energy Agency in 2019 kind of suggested Bastide and Fabry succeeded in a way.
How? Not by creating the cats, obviously.
No, but the report argued their main achievement might not have been proposing a literal genetically engineered cat. It was more about creating this incredibly powerful, sticky image, the Ray cat, that made people confront the reality of nuclear waste and the profound difficulty of ensuring safety across millennia.
Huh. So the idea of the Ray cat was the real message. The symbol itself raised awareness.
That's the argument.
Sure.
The image itself did the semiotic work, sparking conversation and thought, even without a single color-changing feline existing.
So, summing up the Ray cat, it starts as this philosophical semiotic response to a huge technological problem, nuclear waste.
Right.
It blends biology, folklore, communication theory, and then it takes on this unexpected life in pop culture with podcasts, songs, even fictional baseball teams.
It's quite a journey for an idea.
And maybe that's the key insight, the aha moment here. Maybe the point wasn't just the literal biological Ray cat. Maybe the genius was creating a symbol so potent, so memorable, almost mythological, that the story of the Ray cat could itself serve as a kind of warning, carried across time.
It certainly makes you think differently about how messages endure. It's less about the specific medium, perhaps, and more about the power of the core concept.
Which leaves us with a really interesting question for you, the listener. Thinking about this Ray cat idea, what other seemingly outlandish, maybe even sci-fi concepts might actually hold real wisdom?
Yeah, what unconventional solutions that we need for the other huge long-term challenges humanity faces. Things that force us to communicate and think and plan across generations in ways we haven't even conceived of yet. What's the next Ray?